Okay, I've got 3:45, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. You guys know who I am, but what I want you to get to know is Ebony. This is the Demystifying the Public Contractor Eligibility Process. And this is Ebony, Ebony
Davis.
Sorry, you did not hear anywhere. There you are, Ebony Davis. Ebony's the Public Contracts Unit Administrator for the State of Illinois Department of Human Rights, where she enforces the provisions of the Illinois Human Rights Act and the department's administrative rules. She also provides technical assistance regarding equal employment opportunity and affirmative action provided to public contractors, eligible bidders, contracting agencies, and units of the department. Ebony served the department as a certified professional instructor and facilitator with the department's Institute for Training and Development, leading various equal employment opportunity, non-discrimination, and life skills training throughout the state of Illinois. Ebony has served in the public sector for more than a decade. Much of her tenure has been with IDHR, where she also served as human rights investigator, conducting neutral and fair investigations in accordance with the Illinois Human Rights Act to protect the rights of residents of Illinois from discrimination in the workplace, higher education, and places of public accommodation. Ebony believes that through outreach and education, employers will be equipped with the necessary information to become an eligible bidder and eventually a public contractor with the state of Illinois. Ebony, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you very much for being here today.
Great, thank you for having me. So before I get started, by a show of hands, how many of you are already familiar with the Public Contracts Unit with the Department of Human Rights? Just by a show of hands, you can just raise your hand either raise your virtual hand or your hand. Okay. All right. So thank you for that, Kelly. So today I'm going to give you just some information, useful information about the Department of Human Rights Public Contract Unit, and go over briefly what the Public Contract Unit does and what is our role in terms of procurement and securing and maintaining contracts with the state of Illinois. So our role at the Public Contracts Unit is we enforce the Illinois Human Rights Act. So we ensure, one, that vendors or eligible bidders are registered and they're eligible to bid on state contracts. That eligibility comes with several different things. So first, we ensure that the employers receive what we call a public contractor eligibility number, or IDHR number. The second piece of that is compliance. Compliance is what I oversee for the PCU. When it comes to compliance, we make sure that employers are meeting all of state and federal guidelines in terms of equal opportunity employment. So what that looks like, and I'll go through some screens here in a bit, when it comes to auditing and desk audits that we do for employers. But when let me go to the, so I'm gonna, if I could, I don't know how I can share it, get my screen. I got it. Let me know if you all can you all see my screen?
We can see it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So before I get into it, let me just give you the overview. So this is the Department of Human Rights website, and this is a brief overview of the Public Contracts Unit. So our objective is to enforce, as I stated earlier, provisions of the Illinois Human Rights Act and the department's administrative rules that apply to public contractors and eligible bidders, and require them to refrain from unlawful discrimination, undertake affirmative action in employment, and develop written sexual harassment policies. Our traditional mission has been carried out through a series of activities. So one, registration, as I mentioned, of potential state bidders and the maintenance of eligibility status records. Compliance reviews of public contractors and eligible bidders to determine adherence to pertinent provisions of the act and rules. technical assistance regarding equal employment opportunity and affirmative action provided to public contractors, eligible bidders, contracting agencies, and units of the department, and then oversight of the EEO-AA monitoring programs for public contractors and eligible bidders operated by other units of state government under the authority of the acts and rules. So let's start with the IDHR eligibility number. So this number allows eligible bidders to bid on state contracts. So an employer is not a vendor with the state if they don't have an IDHR number, because that number is what makes them an eligible bidder to bid on state contracts. I know I have worked in the past with employees of PTAC who have called me for technical assistance for individuals who were either looking to renew their number, had questions about how to register for a number, or they had an issue with a compliance review and did not know how to respond. And so I thank goodness for PTAC, because you all do a very good job. In order for an employer to receive an IDHR eligible, I don't know why I'm having problems, and I say this all day long, eligibility number, they have to pay a $75 non-refundable registration fee. Once this fee is paid, that number is good for 5 years. So 5 years from the date of application or the date of renewal, that employer will have that IDHR number. Now, that isn't to say that during the course of those 5 years, there may be instances that occur where there's an interruption in that IDHR eligibility number, and the employer at that time is not eligible to bid on state contracts. And I'll talk about what some of those instances are. When it comes to registering, if you have an employer that has a main location or headquarters or corporate location, and they have subsidiaries, they are not required to pay $75 for each subsidiary, only for the corporate location. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is that when they have that corporate number and they have subsidiaries or different locations, if that corporate number is expired or there's an interruption in that corporate IDHR eligibility number, that will impact the renewal of your location or your subsidiary. So I want to stop right there before I move forward. Are there any questions regarding PCU or the IDHR eligibility number? What is happening? I think because I talk all the time. Any questions regarding?
We don't have anything in the chat unless anyone wants to open their mic and ask Ebony a question.
Thanks, Kelly. So what businesses must register? All entities seeking to do business with the state of Illinois, potential bidders must file if any one of the following applies. Now, this information here comes directly from the JCAR rules. There has been a change when it comes to the definition of an employer. The definition of an employer changed to, instead of it being 15 or more employees, it's 1 or more. So now all employers who wish to do business with the state of Illinois must have an IDHR eligibility number to bid on state contracts. They must also have a model employer sexual harassment policy. Now, we will allow employers to submit their policies to us just based on what they have. They are not reviewed in terms of when they initially submit it. However, those policies are reviewed when it comes time for us to audit those employers. And I'll talk about the auditing process here shortly. If an employer does not have a model sexual harassment policy, the department does have a policy that we will allow. I'm trying to get to the other screen. We will allow the employer to adopt. Give me 1 second. I don't want to go there. I want to go back. I'm having problems with my screen. I apologize. Okay, there. I need to dock that to the bottom because it was giving me a problem. So when it comes to the sexual harassment policy, you want to make sure that your employers have a policy that has all 7 required elements. These are all the required elements per state law. If, as I was mentioning earlier, if they do not have a policy, they can adopt a policy and they can find the policy right here. They would simply need to just type their company name. They can either add it to their handbook or they can add it as an addendum to their handbook. But the policy must have all 7 required elements. In addition to that, the policy has to be available for all employees to access, and the employer is required to, let me move this. The employer is required to post the department's postings in a conspicuous area that all employees are able to see. So the sexual harassment posters, the required posters per state law. Are there any questions regarding this requirement?
So Ebony, if we could just confirm, the screen you showed previously said 15 or more employees, but what I think you said is the rules have changed. So even if you're a single owner, you still have to have this information in place. You have to get an IDHR number. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. So the Department of Human Rights, we're governed by the Illinois Human Rights Act and JCAR rules. So the rules and the act, the rules indicate the 15 or more employees. The act has changed the definition of an employer, which is, I'm sorry, I have my hands in my face, 1 or more employees. So therefore, any employer that has 1 or more employees must have the IDHR number. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Any other questions? Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So obviously this hasn't really flowed down into the acquisition rule, because we were just on a conference or just on a training yesterday, and with the higher education procurement, and they mandate you issue an IDHR for their proposals. And then they just said, well, businesses with under 15 employees are exempt. So obviously that is going to change then.
Yeah, that changed once the definition of an employer changed. Because the 15 or more employees requirement is based on the definition of an employer, and prior to the recent law change, it was an employer was defined as one that had 15 or more employees for the state. But that changed, and so now when we look at employers, individuals that have 1 or more employees must have their IDHR number.
I have a question. So one of the choice within when you're going through the IPG, and one of the choices is I don't need an IDHR, and the third choice is saying because I have less than 15 employees, that verbiage is about to change in the application. And then also when this was initially supposed to go in effect in 2020, it was a simplified form within the site. The link paid your $75 and you were done. Then it updated the application process to such a lengthy process that it just pretty much stopped our clients from even moving forward. They've tried to send this paperwork off to their HRs to try to figure out, no, the application went into such a different pace. And that's what we need to be walked through. If that's going to be the norm now, is that application. It's absolutely ridiculous, the new format of that application for 15 plus employers. I have not seen one person in a year complete it. They just tell me, never mind.
So can you go back to the IPG and Kelly? I don't know if she's still on, but I'd like somebody to send that information to me. The problem is that not all departments, we talk with each other, right? And so I'm actually working right now on a plan to figure out how we can all come together. And so make sure that everybody's on the same page, because ultimately without the IDHR number, no procurements are going to move forward. And in knowing this, because we don't access IPG, because our main role is just to register and make sure employers are compliant, this is good information to have and to know. So can you either send that to me, screenshot it and send it to me so I know what question you're referencing? And then we are going to talk about the application or registration or renewal process here in this meeting, in this training.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. These are all great questions. Any other questions? Okay. So again, if your employer, if they don't have a sexual harassment policy, they're able to adopt the policy and they are able to put their name on it or either have it in their handbook or as an addendum to their handbook. So where to start? So thank you so much, Ms. Kelly, for asking that question and making those statements. You are correct. Prior to March of 2021, the process was very, very simplified in terms of individuals, employers, or individuals' ability to register or renew an IDHR number. In March of last year, March of 2021, that whole process changed. And it changed because the department purchased the statewide platform, the Enterprise Licensing and Permitting System, which is now a system designed to allow employers the ability to go into the system, to register, to renew. They're also able to print their certificates there. Any changes that they need to make to their company, any maintenance transactions that they need to make to their profile, they're able to do that on their own. Whereas before, all of those maintenance transactions were given directly to my staff, and we had to make those adjustments accordingly. But now employers are able to do that. They don't no longer have to wait for a certificate. They can go right to their profile, their system, and print their certificate of eligibility. So I want to go ahead and do a where to start. So this, I'm trying to move these screens around because they're like blocking everything. I don't know how to, okay, much better. Okay, so where to start public contracts. We always send, if people want to register or renew and have not used this system before, this new Enterprise ELP system, we send them to this site right here, where to start. So you see the address, the web address in the bar. Once they come here, there's a series of questions that are asked of them. Are you a first-time registrant? Are you renewing? If you have a current number and need to renew or register a business location, you would go here. And then if you want to do those maintenance transactions that I talked about, updating the registration, so processing a company name change request, an address change request, or relinquishing their number, So employers have the ability to say, you know what, I don't want to do business with the state anymore. We've, changed the focus of our company, the direction of our company, and therefore we want to relinquish our number. They have the ability to do that as well. And then they can reinstate and renew an expired number. Now, this first portion, it says the above option is for businesses whose prior number has expired and that expiration is beyond the 30 days. If it's within 30 days from an expired number, then they will use the PC1 or PC1A renewal option because they're still within that 30-day time period, excuse me. Then the next option is to reactivate an IDHR number. It says the above option is for businesses whose number has been deactivated or relinquished. So deactivated means these are individuals who the department may have deactivated their number. We may have relinquished their number. We may have revoked their number for failure. Generally, it's for failure to comply with the department's audit process, or we may relinquish their number if they don't maintain their address. So per the rules, if an employer does not maintain their address and the department receives return mail, we are immediately required to deactivate or relinquish that number. Okay, any questions here before I move forward? Okay. So we also have an ELP user guide. It's very comprehensive and it allows employers the opportunity to go through and kind of read what the ELP process is, how they can renew or register their number, and answer any questions that they may have. If they're still having difficulties and they don't know what to do, then they can send an email to Public Contracts and we will respond at that time. So let me go back. We also have on our website eligible bidders and vendors list current. So if you have an eligible bidder or a vendor who has an IDHR number and you want to check the status, or a contracting agency wants to check the status of that number, they're able to go to this portion of the website, and where it says explore, they would click on explore. You can preview and it would let you know the list of all eligible bidders, excuse me, or vendors who are currently eligible as of May 9th, 2022. This document is updated monthly at the beginning of every month, and it also has the current expiration date for the employers or the eligible bidders. If there is ever a question with regards to an employer eligible bidder's status, because that number is not seen in that database or on that spreadsheet, you have the ability to either email myself. I have a lot of contracting agencies or purchasing officers to email me. They'll email IDHR Public Contracts, or they will email Mr. Derek Griggs, and we can check the status to let you all know what's happening. If that number is not showing, it's typically because that number is expired or it's deactivated due to either being revoked or relinquished. So let's kind of go through the process. So let's do a first time registration. Hopefully this does not. So Kelly, this would be the area as to where, and hopefully it will let me go all the way through. This would be the area where employers or eligible bidders would start when it comes to registration or renewing. So if they don't know their username, a lot of times another issue that we've seen, and it's so, and I just want to stress this point, it's so important to tell or remind the eligible bidders and vendors to keep all of their contact information up to date. What we've seen is that in instances of a prior registration, so since we just launched this new system March of last year, any information that we have in the system would be from the prior years prior to March of 2021. So if they have an HR person that no longer works for the company, but that HR person was the one 5 years ago that registered or renewed that number, that's the person's login information that we have. And if they don't know the password, if they don't remember who that person is, or sometimes they might think that it's the CEO or the president or the secretary, and it's actually the HR person. So knowing who the contact person is and keeping that person's information current is imperative. It will avoid a lot of delays in registration. It will avoid a lot of back and forth emails and us trying to reach out to the tech team to help us to figure out what the username is. But they could go here, if they know their username, they can log in with their username, or they can recover a username. If they need to activate an account. So when we first initiated this program, we sent out a ton of activation links to all of those that were in our old system so that they could activate their account. And we sent links with the username. The username was the email address of the prior contact person. So if you don't have that, we have to resend out another activation link. And if they don't have an account, then they could go ahead and create an account. So what I want to do is get into the system and see if it will allow me to walk through. So I don't think it's going to let me walk through the process. So what I'm going to do, because this is also going to answer, your question. So in the ELP system, when vendors and eligible bidders go in to register or renew, they do have to upload a lot of documents. And a lot of times, as you said, they'll say they don't want to upload it, or they don't want to bother. There is a reason as to why they're required to upload those documents. All of the documents that they're required to upload are documents that we use as part of our compliance review. So they're required to upload their sexual harassment policy. If they have an affirmative action policy, they're required to upload that. If they have an EEO policy, they're required to upload that information. All of the documentation that's there, we use in our compliance review. And we capture that information when they renew or register, so they don't have to resubmit the information again and get held up during the compliance review process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah, I have a question though. I mean, I've been in the system. It's really complicated. And what happened was, I mean, if I wasn't able to upload all of the documents, it wouldn't let me continue or submit.
Exactly. And if you can't finish it in one sitting, which the information is coming from so many different portals, it rarely can be done in one sitting. It locks down each of the areas that's left unobtained, makes you have to start the process over because the application is not usable at that point. So it's like wherever they left off, they can't make any adjustments, they can't change. they can't upload, and don't let it go back to the next day. It's totally locked, and it requires them to, you can't even do a refresh. I've sat for 2.5 hours with someone and I gave up, so.
And the
Is
user
it
guide,
timing out? Is it timing out after a certain amount of time?
yeah,
Yeah, it just shuts down because it's like it gives you an allotment of time. You cannot possibly do it in that time. There, you know, and you don't know what the next item is that they want you to retrieve. So by the time you get to the next sector, you'll need this, this, and that. Well, now they need to, maybe that's not housed in that person's system or in the general guidance system. So now, you know, if they knew ahead of time everything that they would need, then that would be helpful. They can compile it in one space. But you don't know what's on the next question, you can't go back, you can't go forward, and you can't move past the document. Like I said, 2.5 hours later, I gave up.
I am so sorry, 2.5 hours. Jeez,
2.5 hours.
Oh my goodness. So this is great feedback because this, we have not heard, I haven't heard, it hasn't been brought to my attention that it was shutting down after a certain time. And the suggestion that you had, since it does shut down after a certain time, of knowing prior to what's required to prep them so they can have it there, I think we will definitely work on that. I'm taking a note so we can make a change in the system.
I also had a question
Sure.
from one of my clients. There were 2 African-American owners, and there's only 2 employees, both of them, and they were wondering why they had to develop an affirmative action plan.
So they don't have to develop an affirmative action plan. The question is, do you have an affirmative action plan? So
But
if you
it was mandatory document upload. It wouldn't let the system continue until you uploaded all documents.
So they must have missed a step, but I'll have our IT team to go back in there because that's a question, that's an optional. We set that up as an optional, and the question should be, do you have an affirmative action plan? If they say yes, then it will not let you move forward if they don't upload it. If you say no, then it will allow you to move forward. So I'll have them to check into that to make sure.
And the homepage is so confusing on where you go and what you do. I mean, there should just be a button there going, are you applying for the first time? Do you already have a certification? Are you renewing? But it doesn't.
So are you referencing the homepage that I just showed you? Where to start?
Yes.
So this is, so I guess I'm confused. You said it doesn't tell you where to start? Or because everything is here, like if you're first time, if you're renewing, if the employer or vendor knows what they want to do, right? Then they should just go, if I know I don't have an IDHR number, I want one, then I need to click on first time registration to access the online form. If I know that I need to renew because I've had a number and I received a notification, that's the other piece. We send out renewal notices 90 days prior to that number expiring. Keep in mind that that renewal notice, and please let your people know this, that renewal notice will go to that last email address of the contact person that we have on file. And so what we've seen is that because the employer doesn't remember who that contact person was, and they don't have access, they miss that notification. And then what happens is their number expires. And then it comes time for them to want to bid on a contract, and they have to start the process all over again of reactivating a number. And that can be, very difficult. So, but everything is here outlined for them to go. If they know what they want to do, they could just go click here and it walks them through the process. So I'm sorry, some of them are having some difficulty, but I'm definitely looking at, I'll have them look at that affirmative action. The only required, it should in the system, the only required document that if an employer says that they don't have is the sexual harassment policy. If they indicate they do not have a sexual harassment policy, that is the only document that if they don't upload it or if they say no, will stop them. It should be rather, would stop them from moving forward. Because per law, they have to have that document. The other documents are required per the department's auditing process. Are there any other questions or comments?
So I have a question. So for everyone who's registered in IPG, that gives them an entirely different direction of eligibility, meaning you have less than 15 employees. This isn't a necessary step. And now, and you're saying if they don't have the IDHR, that they're not eligible to apply for or to respond to any open bids. Does that mean, how do we go back and capture all of these people who we've been under one guideline? So they're applying, and their ineligibility could be for the fact that they don't have an IDHR number, which the system told them they didn't need. So how do you?
Right, so that would be a conversation that we need to have with the Chief Procurement Office. So when we first launched this system, there was a notice that was sent out because we realized that in IPG, there's like, it wasn't a lot. It was maybe like so many thousands of individuals that fell within that category that needed to receive an IDHR number that wouldn't necessarily have had it prior to the law changing. And so a notification was sent out to them telling them that they needed to have that IDHR number. Now, in terms of, I did write it down in terms of, and then you're gonna also send me a screenshot, right?
I'm going to try to get in there because you have to actually have an account to get in to get to the application. So since there isn't a hard copy out there, if I'll see if I can get a client to log in and get to the application so I can screenshot it.
That'll be great because I will, my department will talk to the Chief Procurement Office with regards to that, because we weren't aware, well, I wasn't aware rather, that question was in the system. We just knew that there were, you know, a small amount of vendors or eligible bidders in IPG that didn't have an IDHR number because they weren't required to. Now, contracting agencies are requiring them to have IDHR numbers, and so they should be sending them back to the department or back to you all to assist them in getting that IDHR number. So hopefully, I will say this, per the rules, an eligible bidder, with the exception of construction contracts, right? So with the exception of construction contracts, an eligible bidder can bid on a state contract without having their IDHR number. The only caveat to that is they must have their IDHR number prior to it being awarded if they win. With the exception of construction contracts, those employers, those eligible bidders have to have that IDHR number prior to bid opening.
And can you tell me an average of the turnaround time for the people who have to go back and complete this PC1 form? I guess it's because when it was done online, you completed the application. It was very simple. You paid your $75. I would tell you, you and I sat next to each other at an event in November of 2019. And I am knowing that that was coming down the pike in the beginning of 2020. I made sure everyone had an IDHR number until it got to that point in 2020 when message notifications went out that that was not the case. So I had to stop pushing and get people into it. And then when the form changed, that form was the holdup. So I don't even know what the turnaround time is. Before they were issued their number within 2 to 3 days via email. So I have no idea now how long it takes.
The turnaround time is 24 to 72 hours or 3 to 5 business days. So but we say that turnaround time, that's our stated turnaround time, but we move them very fast. So I would say, you know, safely 24 to 48 hours, they get approved, but they have to make sure that everything is in the system, that they don't receive any errors or rejections. But we move them out fairly simply because everything is all there. Unless they forget to add in EEO data, or they have an address incorrect that's not matching up. We move those applications fairly rapidly with this new, and I would say that's in part, you know, thanks to this new system. So as I mentioned earlier, but are there any other questions before I move on? Okay.
There's nothing in the chat, Ebony.
Okay, thank you. So as I had was mentioning earlier, the documents that employers are required to upload are necessary for the auditing process. And this is what this document, can everybody see this?
No,
Oh, you can't see it?
we've been on the first screen you showed at the very beginning. Nothing's moved since then.
Nothing's moved?
No.
Do you see this screen now? What do you see on the screen?
Where to start public contracts is all
Oh.
that's all we've ever seen.
Oh my goodness, I've been on 3 different, it says my screen sharing is paused. You know what, hold on, please. Okay, you know what, it went to a different, so you see the where to start public contracts?
Yes, that's
Okay.
where we've been, yeah.
Okay. So I had went here. Did you all see that?
No,
The IDHR, so discussion of the IDHR eligibility number. Did you all see the required sexual harassment policy elements?
the numbers, the 7, yes.
Okay, you saw that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, and then I stopped here for the vendor business compliance review. Do you see that?
I see it now, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, my apologies. So I'm going to go to the compliance review document that we use to do our audits. Do you see the compliance review questionnaire?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned earlier, the documents that we require employers to provide at registration or renewal are necessary for the completion of this questionnaire. And so we use this questionnaire to ensure EEO compliance of our employers. This questionnaire, as you see, is very comprehensive. We are going to be making some changes to this questionnaire in the near future. We ask for complaints of unlawful discrimination. We are going to start tracking employers that have had repeated sexual harassment settlements. That was a recent change to the law and a requirement of our department to track those employers. And so that is going to be a general question, not a general question, but a specific question that's going to be added to the questionnaire. Instead of knowing all complaints of unlawful discrimination, we are really going to solely focus on sexual harassment complaints. We ask them to attach a copy of their policy if they have it. This is not a working online document where they can upload it into a link. They actually would have to email this. The reason why we have them to attach copies is because if there's been a change to a policy, anything like that, we want to compare it to the data that we have in the system. The employee handbook. And then we talk about public contracts and grants. Now, what we've seen here during our auditing times is that sometimes employers will say, oh no, I'm not a public contractor, or I don't have any public contracts. but we have access to the comptroller's office, and we verify and look to see if an employer has had contracts, been awarded a contract, a grant, anything that's considered a contract per state law. And if they received money for that, they will be deemed a public contractor. And so therefore, if they choose not to comply, then they would have to, they would have their number potentially revoked if they choose not to comply with the auditing process. Moving on. We asked, does the company use subcontractors to complete the contract? We ask all about their equal employment opportunity clause that's in the contract. We look for that. Sometimes we will pull the contract from the contracting agency to see if that clause is in there to make sure. We ask about recruitment and advertisement, making sure that the required language, the EEO language, is in there. If they have a union contract, we look at that as well. And then we look at the statistical data. So one of the major things when it comes to compliance, we look to see is if an employer is underutilizing minorities and females. If they are underutilizing minorities and females, we go through a whole process and formula to determine the percentage. And if it falls under a certain percentage, we will require them to develop an affirmative action plan. So as Kelly had read my bio, it talked about technical assistance. This is where the technical assistance comes in, where we provide some assistance, not a lot, because developing an affirmative action plan can be very difficult. But we do provide assistance in terms of helping employers to know where to look to find examples of affirmative action plans. We provide examples of affirmative action plans. Sometimes we send them to the EEOC's website, but they will have to provide that. And they have to show how they are going to remedy that issue by either hiring more minorities and females, or if it's a particular category where I've seen instances where it's a very specialized skill and there might not be a lot of minorities and females in that category, then there are other ways to remedy that. Any questions regarding this before I move forward?
Just I have one comment, because this just doesn't seem to target small businesses, which is who we deal with. Mm-hmm. So the average company we deal with has probably 1 to 3 people. And the process here is for much larger businesses. But the process is the same, even though we're trying to target small business. How are they going to mitigate a problem where they're not, showing through their utilization or diversity, and it's a family-owned business of 2 and 3 people, but yet we want to keep pushing them to get out there and get competitive in the small business government space. They're not going to expand. The business isn't that large, yet we're pushing them to get into government contracts.
Mm-hmm. So that would be a question for procurement. I understand the question, and there are some contracts that are geared towards small businesses, and that it's a good fit for those businesses. I've seen contracts. It depends on what contract you're referencing. So I've seen companies that have cleaning contracts, a lot of IT, a lot of the smaller contracts I've seen as IT contracts that employers may have with universities, different things like that. So it really just depends, but our process is the same as long as that employer is an eligible bidder. The process is the same. But I understand your question or concern about, you know, mom and pop companies, you know, going up against corporations or larger companies. It doesn't seem fair, but that would be, you know, a conversation I think that definitely procurement could have with you. But any questions regarding this? And again, if there are some pieces in this, like the statistical data, where a mom and pop company, a small business may not have 15 employees, 50 employees, then they would just put the amount of employees that they do have. Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat, Ebony, so.
Okay, all right. A couple of things that I just wanted to touch on. So, give me 1 second, I'm sorry. The auditing process is really a random process. It's a blind pool that we do to pull approximately 300 to 350 employers for the audits. And as long as the information is provided, they have 60 days to provide the information. We do allow additional time if requested. But if they don't request additional time or they don't respond, then per the rules, that number will be revoked. And what that means, once the number is revoked, is it will not show up on the list that I showed earlier that's on our website. And contracting agencies will generally call to say, hey, we don't see this number on the site. Are they still active? And that's when we would let them know that it's revoked for failure to comply with the department's compliance review. Any other key? I have a couple of additional things that I want to touch on, but before I do that, I just want to ask, are there any other questions that you all have for me or the department's process or regarding the department's process? Okay. Now, Kelly, when you were saying small businesses are really the group that you all work with, how many employers are they primarily? Exactly how many would you say are in IPG currently?
That I work with,
Mm-hmm.
I have a base of about 800 clients.
About 800. Okay, and Kelly, do you know how many roughly are in IPG in total? Is it like 5,000?
No, I don't know the overall for IPG, no.
Okay. Okay, all right. And the average amount of employees that a small business might have?
2 to 3.
2 to 3.
No, that's for her.
That's just looking at my numbers.
Okay.
Right. I mean, a small business could have 1,000 employees.
Right, that's why I wanted to be clear. Okay.
Well, based on if you like a NACE codes, who are looking at numbers, you can have a NACE code that is considered a small business by that code if they have 1,000 or 500. I'm just talking about the people who come to us to say, help us get our business started.
Yeah. Well,
Got it.
My average person that says, come help get our business started does not have 1,500, not even 10 employees. And those that are consistent on the books who've been around for a few years may have 10, 15, 20 employees.
I would probably put in a range. We deal with companies, I would say mostly between 1 and 50 employees.
1 and 50.
How's that?
That's fine. That's fine. Thanks, Chris. Okay. And do you know what types of contracts primarily these businesses are attempting to secure or they have already secured?
Small construction, IT, janitorial services.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Perfect. All right. So that's what I wanted to make sure.
And a lot of small manufacturers,
Okay.
family small manufacturing companies.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. That's good to know. So based on the population that you all serve, a lot of the things that I mentioned may not impact them. The only impact that they may see is not having that IDHR number. But again, with the exception of construction contracts, they can still bid on a contract. And generally, if they bid on a contract and they are about to be awarded a contract, I've seen this in many instances from different contracting agencies, or they did not know that they needed to bid or needed to have an IDHR number. The contracting agency will reach out and say, hey, does this employer have an IDHR number? They put a bid in for a contract. We want to award the contract, but we can't award it without the number. Then we work with that, generally that contracting agency and that employer to expedite that number and help walk them through that process so they can secure their number. I do want to point out with construction contracts, and this is very, very imperative, it may or may not impact depending on the number of employees and depending on what this employer writes when they write their bid. Depending on what they write in the bid, it may or may not impact them. But we work closely with contracting, we meaning the public contracts unit, works closely with contracting agencies, purchasing officers, especially CDBs, Fair Employment Practices Compliance Technicians. And the reason why I said this may not impact you all is because what I have seen recently within the past couple of years, this has impacted larger employers on construction contracts. But if you have, but just think about it. If you have an employer that puts in a bid for a construction contract and they indicate that they're minority-owned business, women-owned business, or they are going to hire so many minorities in there, and there's a percentage that they use that CDB will accept to show, okay, we can look at this as minority owned, or they have subcontractors that are minority owned businesses. A lot of times that will happen where primes will contract with subcontractors that are minority owned businesses. If that happens, please note that CDB, their Fair Employment Practices compliance technicians will go to those job sites. When they go to those job sites, they look to see if the number of minorities or the number of women that particular employer indicated they will have working for them on certain parts of the contract or during certain times. They look to see if they are actually there. If they are not there, there's a process that they go through, that the technicians go through. I believe, I don't know all the ins and out of their process. I just know when it comes to my office. So they'll let them know you need to make sure that you have these minorities or women on site. They'll go and check again. They don't have them there again. They will eventually alert my department. Once the notification comes to my department that they are not in compliance with the Fair Employment Practices, based on that information and everything that compliance technician indicates in the report, that employer can potentially have their number revoked and potentially not have it reinstated ever. So it's very critical, and I've spoke on this several times at vendor fairs, it's very critical for these types of contracts to make sure that if you are a prime contractor and you say, yes, we are working with a minority subcontractor or a women-owned subcontractor, and we're going to have so many amount of minorities or females there that they are actually there because you're getting funding or you got that contract based on that sheer fact. Any questions regarding that? Okay.
And I just say I definitely appreciate all your input today, and you have demystified the process for us. So thank you so much. It's the details that you know why you do something, but it's really great to know when you're drilling down the purpose of it, and because eventually the question comes to us as, well, why?
Right. And please email me if you have questions and you're stuck. I know, like I said, I've worked with employees of PTAC before who have reached out, and we've got some things clarified for that eligible bidder, for that vendor. So I'm glad that I was able to be of assistance. That's why I was telling Kelly, I didn't want to do a PowerPoint. I actually wanted to show you documents and walk through a process so you understand this is why we ask for this. This is why we ask for that. The other piece, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is to please, I can't stress this enough, because as I went to my office last week, I had a stack of returned mail from the post office. And per the rules, when we receive returned mail, we have to revoke that number. So I had been talking to my superiors to think about, okay, is there an issue with the post office going on? Because to receive this much returned mail, and it'll say unforwardable, undeliverable, company no longer exists, things like that are stamped on there. We have revoked a lot of numbers for employers that were in the bidding process, and the contracting agency is like calling, are they eligible or are they not? And we let them know their number is revoked. It cannot be, we have to reactivate it, but they have to show us that, their address is actually correct. I had one employer that, they were actually a vendor, not even an eligible bidder, but she had said, we've been here for like 30 years. And I said, I showed her, I sent it to her. I said, well, I'm looking at a piece of mail that was returned. And anytime we receive returned mail, we have to revoke. So I've talked to my superiors about exhibiting some grace with that and contacting the employers. But if I can't get a hold of them to say, hey, are you still at this address, instead of revoking their number? Because I feel like something is happening. I don't know what with the post office, and they were going through things. So I said, let's just exhibit some grace and let's contact them before we immediately go and revoke to see, hey, are you all still there? Because revoking will hold up an awarding of a contract. So please, I can't stress that enough, to make sure that they have their information current in the system, but not just in procurement, not just in IPG, but with IDHR as well. Anything else? Well, if there aren't any other questions, again, my email address, Kelly, I think, do they have my email address?
I can look at, I have your business card.
Oh, okay. So yeah, feel free to contact me. Do not contact me directly. Do not send, if you have a specific question, do not send it to idhr.publiccontracts, because I look at those only if there's an issue and it's forwarded to me. But if you need me to respond to something immediately, send it directly to me so I can go ahead and give you a response. And I don't have anything further.
Ebony, we really thank you for this information today. And Eileen is exactly right. This has been very helpful. There is a little demystification. The title was perfect, because we do have many questions that come up about IDHR. So this was very helpful. We thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Would you be willing to put your email in the chat, or would you like me to do that? Just in case someone doesn't have it.
I'll put it in the chat right now.
That would be great.
And we are working remotely, but I do, I'm clearly on my work issue laptop. So I do check my email pretty regularly.
Okay, great. It's there.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions for Ebony, then we will, again, thank you for doing this for us, and we will close this session for today. Look forward to seeing everyone first thing in the morning for our general session. Tomorrow's our last morning, so excited to see everyone. Thank you
Okay, thank you.
again.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.